Good morning and welcome to the Raben Report. I'm your host, Raben, so get ready to get triggered. Good morning and welcome to the very last episode of the Raben Report. I'm your host, Raben, as you might have heard in our intro. And with me, as usual, for the last time this season, I have my expert panel, Marshall, Adam, and Daniel. How are you guys?
Good.
Doing very well.
Bittersweet.
Bittersweet.
Exam season's up, so.
That's true, yeah.
Exam sweet. Nice.
So, today we started at 11 a.m. exactly to give you one entire hour of content. On top of that, we're going to skip our 5-minute recap of the week because this will be the episode you talk to your grandkids about. At least I will. I don't know about you guys. But so today's topic, free speech. In order to really talk about this subject in full depth, we brought on two very special guests. The first is one of the founders of Students Supporting Free Speech at York University, Priyank D'Sa. I hope I said that right. And the second is a popular contributor to the Rebel Media, Fayza. So welcome to the show, guys.
Where are the cameras? So many of them.
Sorry.
There you're on camera now. So, thank you guys for coming on today. This episode, we're going to dig deep into the concept of a free speech, and how it differs from hate speech, and how free speech is interpreted on college and university campuses. This is a very controversial issue we're going to discuss, and what better way than to do it on our last episode. Whatever everyone says, whether everyone says what they'd like, or I suppress everyone by cutting their mics, it'll be a great show. Now, before we get to the questions, we are live on spiritlive.ca and Facebook Live, so you can tune into us there and message us live on our Facebook page to have your thoughts read live on air by Marshall. Wherever you are, whatever you think, we want to hear it. So, without further ado, let's begin our final episode. The first question is directed at our guests. Why don't you both tell our audiences a little about yourselves? Priyank, let's start with you.
Hi, so my name is Priyank D'Sa. I'm an undergraduate student at York University. I'm studying political science, and a few of us at York and myself, we actually have started the Students Supporting Free Speech at York University. So, as many would know, there's the UFT group, and what we've done is now created a York University group, and we're hoping we will have one, at Ryerson, at other universities as well across Canada. And because right now in this current climate, there's a need for free speech groups on campuses, especially in Canada, and they seem to be absent. And there's a change happening, and it's great to be part of that.
Awesome, thank you. And Jay, let's hear about you.
Sorry, I can't really hear you on my microphone.
Oh, you can't?
Sorry, on my headset.
Oh, okay.
Not really getting anything right now. I did hear you because you're in the other room.
Oh, okay.
So if you want me to talk about myself, that's fine. But I don't hear what you're saying exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
On your headset.
Yeah. Talk. Go ahead. Tell us about yourself. Okay.
Yeah.
We're just gonna. I'll just talk to you guys a bit while we're just fixing that issue.
Here as well. Got no audio.
No audio at all.
No audio
there should be a Spirit
I do
One.
hear what you're saying.
Yeah,
because you're in the other room, but
There's a
I'm not
Spirit-
hearing you on the headset.
Oh, okay. There's a Spirit One little knob, and make sure they turn it up. Can you guys hear me now?
It's all the way up.
It's all the way up?
Already it was.
That is weird. Try Spirit 2.
There's Spirit 2 now?
Yeah.
Is that better?
Can you hear us now?
Nothing.
No?
Nothing.
That's awkward. Okay, we'll just keep the door open. How's that? We'll keep this door open.
For now, I guess.
And hopefully they'll be able to hear what we're saying.
Yeah, we hear what you're saying.
Okay, cool. So, Jay, why don't you tell us about yourself?
Yeah, so I work for Rebel.media, which is a news corporation, online new alternative media that's coming out. We lean mostly conservative, but in the American context, we would be a little bit even more liberal because we are, at the end of the day, Canadians. But telling you more about myself, I go to McMaster University. I study political science, economics, and statistics and philosophy. And besides that, I'm a huge free speech advocate, huge pro-life advocate, and just separate interests are in technology and audiovisual production, that kind of stuff. But I suppose what you're really interested in is my policies on free speech, which I'm a huge free speech advocate, not only McMaster, but on UFT's campus as well.
Awesome. That's great to hear, and we're very lucky to have you on our show today. So to our first real question, what is or what constitutes free speech? I'd like my regular panelists to answer first before we get to our special guest. So guys, what is the answer?
I'll go first. I never really, in my head, free speech was just saying whatever you wanted, however you wanted, wherever you wanted, for a long time. And then the idea of people's safety and people's beliefs and people's, well-being in terms of hearing that free speech and hearing, certain things that could, be trigger warnings or be, very harsh on the ears and such, sort of refined my idea of free speech. And I haven't really been too critical about this for too long. So I'm still drawing where hate speech starts and free speech ends in my head. And trying to sort of vet out my biases towards certain issues that I'm even sensitive about. But for me, free speech is, I believe that everybody has the right to their own beliefs. Even if they are in total opposite of mine. If I'm giving an example, I'm very sort of pro-Palestine, as they would call me, even though I wouldn't be considered pro-Palestine under some, contexts. But if somebody believes that, there are some radical, ultra-Orthodox plans that, the Arabs of Israel should be transferred to Palestine, and in general, the Palestinians should be completely exiled, and Israel should just take over. And if you have that belief, then I think you have that right to the belief. And if you are to present it in a professional manner, I think there's no harm in that. But if you go around with signs of dead Palestinian children and, in support of that, and you're walking around and screaming in my face, then I have a problem with that. And I think that that's where free speech for me at this point in my sort of critical life has ended and hate speech has begun. Basically, if in summary, if you're not a dick about your beliefs, then I think that you have your right to free speech. But when you become a dick, then I think you lose it and it becomes hate speech.
I think for me personally, it's just what I view as like in comparison to the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, which is just Section 2. I think that's just something that every Canadian should uphold in terms of the right of expression, of your opinion and your belief. And also that also constitutes in terms of the freedom of the press, so that you should be able to express your opinion without of any fear of any particular judgment specifically from the government, but you should be able to have be able to take and accept criticism from others. And I think that's just very, very important. So no matter if, an example with what Adam was saying, if you're pro-Israel, pro-Palestine, you should be able to express those opinions, and more importantly, you should be able to express those opinions with other people in a proper, educated, formal discourse manner. That was a bad way to phrase it, but yeah, I think everybody should be able to talk about that. And there's, in terms of the line between hate speech and free speech, it's very, what people are trying to change that particular type of opinion. Some people think that if you're criticizing or if you support one particular political candidate, you're automatically ensuing hate speech, or you're spewing hate speech, which I don't agree with at all. And if somebody supports Stephen Harper back in the day, like, no, you're not committing hate speech at all. That people who think that, they don't know what they're talking about whatsoever.
So I'm a free speech absolutist. My views are relatively in line with the what's been established in Canadian law. Free speech is the right to be able to present any meaning, any thought, any opinion in any way you want. The only time a line should ever be drawn is when your speech by latent effect is in violation of another law. So, for example, with harassment, with a threat, with inciting violence. One thing I've seen that detractors of free speech absolutism often bring up is the shouting fire in a crowded theater argument, which really doesn't apply. Shouting fire in a crowded theater is a call to action. It's a call to a dangerous action specifically. It's a call for people to trample each other, for people to evacuate a building in a hasty manner when there's really no need to. That is not simply expressing a opinion or a thought. That is a call to action. And that's something that a lot of people don't realize that is very important to consider when talking about free speech.
Fair points. And now to our guests. What are your thoughts on what constitutes free speech?
Yeah, so I'm with Marshall on this. I'm a free speech absolutist. I think the way democratic societies work is we should be able to say whatever we want to say, and that includes crazies like West Barrow Baptist Church, or even more radical sort of groups like that. Because as long as stuff is out there, you're able to confront it and talk about it honestly, instead of it just sort of going underground. And the problem I have with hate speech is that it's just too subjective, and everybody defines hate speech differently, and at the same time, like, the government should not be telling you that you can't be hateful. You're a human being, you have the right to be hateful. That's my opinion on that.
And Jay?
So for me, I think there are two approaches when it comes to free speech. There's the philosophical mindset, and there's the legalistic approach. Now, legally speaking, I disagree with the Canadian laws as it's set in place currently, with definitions such as hate speech applying towards free speech. So, for example, if you were to say something hateful as a government employee, there's a chance that you might be stripped away from your job, for example. And I disagree with that. There have been cases where public school teachers, for example, they say something that is clearly offensive, and it's not that they're not just fired. They're not just they don't just strip their teaching licenses away or anything like that. They also face legal ramifications, and I completely disagree with that. I mean, if you are hateful against black people, or if you're hateful against Jews, obviously I morally disagree with that sort of position. But I would take it a step further and say, no, you have the right to say that in a free society. And I might disagree with you, but I'll fight very strongly to say that, no, you have the right to say that. In terms of things like call to actions, for example, I take the approach whereas if a call to action will lead towards violence, or if it was a call to action that led towards violence, you could definitely be legally responsible. But that kind of stuff is to be held up within a court of law. So, for example, simply yelling fire in a theater shouldn't be illegal, but yelling fire in a theater and then that leads to X and Y, that might, in a court of law, that might be something that a judge would actually rule against you on. So in general, I take the free speech absolutist approach, legally speaking, and that's primarily because that primarily attaches to the philosophical mindset. And the philosophical mindset, I think, is that free speech in and of itself is a means to an end. It is the right to say whatever you want to say in a free society. And I think if we live in a free society, if we live in a democratic society, if we live in a society that upholds basic universal human rights, we have to live in a society that supports everyone's freedom of speech, no matter what that speech happens to be. And so it goes back to academia, it goes back to government, whereas if we silence others, we might be silencing the truth. And the only way we could advance as a society is that we allow people in a free market to say and argue whatever they want.
It sounds
Spot
like
on,
a quote.
Jay.
Yeah.
Spot on.
Sounds like a quote from Jay Fayza, actually. I think you've said that before. Yeah. Nice.
So we touched, you all touched a little bit on the topic of hate speech. So my next question, how does free speech differ from hate speech? We mentioned it a bit, but let's go a little more in depth. Anybody can take this question.
Personally, I don't feel like free speech differs from hate speech fundamentally. It's not as if there's anything in particular about a kind of speech that's hateful, or that's teasing an individual, or that's criticizing an individual, or that's just morally repugnant that differs from the idea of free speech. The concept of free speech is that you express yourself in however way you want to, or however fashion you want to. And it's only when you're harming someone that takes it to an extra step. So simply calling someone a nigger, or simply calling someone a kike, or anything like that, which is obviously offensive things to say, that's not in and of itself, that doesn't stray away from the concept of free speech. And so, yes, free speech encompasses what we would all morally find repugnant. Free speech encompasses things that, in many contexts, is abusive. But that's the world we live in, and that's how people speak to each other. So, yeah, to answer your question, I don't really see a difference between hate speech and free speech, fundamentally speaking.
Yeah, I would totally agree. And you know, I've said in the past that I don't think hate speech is a thing, and now I would not so much say that anymore. Hate speech is a thing. But my stance on hate speech is that, you know, I don't think it's natural to expect people not to hate. Hate is and can be very harmful. But in the context of expressing your views, regardless of how deplorable what you're saying is, you know, I think
that word in a while.
I think you are not an advocate of free speech unless you advocate for the speech of people you disagree with to be heard and to be said.
It's a great point.
I think there's a great, I think it was Andrew Jackson quote, I believe, on that, and I wish I could remember it because it's such a great quote. But yeah, you know, I think hate speech, it is a thing, of course, and it's terrible, but if we are allowing the government to say that you cannot espouse these views, that you cannot express these views, who says that the government is not going to decide what is hate speech on their own, based on their own agenda, and decide to criminalize certain speech that simply is questioning their narrative, simply is questioning a common social narrative, the zeitgeist of the times. And I think it's a really dangerous route to go down when you start legislating what is allowed to be said in any regard.
I don't necessarily disagree with any of what you've just said, which might get me some heat, but personally, what the one very big problem that I find with free speech is that it gives a lot of a-holes out there a shield. If you're walking around with pictures of dead fetuses and you're just like, yeah, you know, I think abortion should be illegal, and then if you're confronted, if you're confronted with pro-choice people, and you know, and then you tell them, well, I think you should have been aborted because of your views, and that's happened. I've heard stories. I think it's just a very big shield to hide behind, where these a-holes are like, yeah, man, free speech, I can say whatever I want. And you know, I've learned a lot about what I sort of have come to realize is free speech from people like Marshall, who aren't a-holes.
Oh, you're too kind.
And
You're not contributing to free speech by saying a-hole. You should say asshole, actually, on the air.
all right, you know, I'm about to say it.
I'll suppress you.
All right, basically, people like Marshall and people like Jay and people like Priyank, they're not bad guys, but a lot of bad guys and a lot of just mean and rude people that are mean and rude for the sake of being mean and rude, and don't really have ideas to back up their beliefs. They sort of throw out they spew all this garbage, and they're like, oh yeah, man, free speech can't get me now. So I think that's my issue with free speech, and I think free speech, it can actually be a cover for hate speech, because the two, as Jay said, they're fundamentally the same thing. It's just the protection of speech. It doesn't matter where you draw the line, as long as you protect all of it, then it is free speech.
I don't think you actually disagree with at least their right to say what they want to say, and
fundamentally, I don't
you're disagreeing with their ideas.
No, I don't disagree with what they want to say. I disagree with how they say it.
And they're assholes.
And they're assholes. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
exactly.
Yeah.
So that's
the thing is, do you really want to live in a world where you're legislating respectfulness? Let's put it that way.
Yeah, see, that's the thing, because every government can change about what they believe to be respectful or not. You saw with Harper that he repressed a lot of the climate science.
And yeah, big reason why I had a hard time supporting Harper is, you know, regardless of whether I agree with the speech, it's like as soon as you start suppressing speech, it's automatically a huge red flag for me.
For sure.
Yeah.
The thing is, you said it's a shield for people who are assholes, and I agree with that, but it's also a shield for you, and that shield in and of itself is a protection for you to say what you want to say.
Yeah. Yeah,
It's like,
yeah.
yes, it shields bad beliefs, and yes, it shields assholes, but it also shields good beliefs, and it also shields people who are genuinely good.
Yeah, I get that it
And
comes.
so you can't have your cake and eat it too, is what I'm saying.
I know, and it's very hypocritical for me to be like, yeah, you know, I'm a fan of free speech, but I don't want certain people to have free speech, and that's a very arbitrary line for me to draw, who I determine is an asshole or not. So that's a big fallacy on my part, and you know, I was called out for that.
Yeah, like for me personally,
yeah.
it's like it's not illegal to be a dick or to be rude and to be an asshole towards somebody, but it's very difficult just to draw that line between what is hate speech and free speech and stuff like that. But I think it's like, regardless of what side or what position you take, you should be able to have that respectful idea. An example, what you were talking about with these these pro-life advocates and stuff like that. I was maybe like a couple months ago, they had a couple signs like in front of the Ryerson bookstore, and I saw what they had. It was a picture of this dead fetus with all this blood over it, and it was very graphic imagery and stuff like that. Now, I didn't like what I saw. I don't think anybody would like to see a dead fetus that's like 2 or 3 months old, like just plastered onto the streets of Toronto. But instead of me just start getting all angry and stuff like that, it's like, oh my god, I can't believe you're spewing this bigotry, and so then I was like, no, that's not going to solve the problem. That's not going to be able to cause any actual solutions or have an actual honest conversation. I just started talking. I'm like, okay, why do you think that this is an appropriate action for you to portray your beliefs? And they're like, I just think we've done research that shows that people that actually like look at this graphic material, it does make them have a different perspective on their political perspective towards this particular topic. And I'm like, okay, that's a valid argument. What I was suggesting is like, I know as a university campus, everyone here is an adult, right? So or at least I hope they're an adult in terms of in their behavior. But
adult is also very arbitrary.
Yeah, but what I didn't like, or what I was talking is like, what happens if like maybe a child walks by and they see this graphic imagery? And I would not want to see, like, an example, if I had a child and I saw them walking around, I would not want them to see that just at such a young age, because it would be traumatizing, and I would have to explain the concept of abortion to somebody who's so young. The thing. You know, I
mean, there's one time I came into Mac and I saw anti-Syrian protests, and I saw the bloody and bruised and beat up bodies of people who were Syrian children. So regardless of what your opinion is on Syria, you know, that made me uncomfortable, right? Just seeing a bunch of dead children, that makes me uncomfortable. Yeah. But that brought out their message forth, and it got me thinking, oh, what is my opinion on Syria? And I'll give you another example of that. In the anti-slavery abolitionist movement, they put pictures of slaves in books and in bars and taverns and that kind of stuff, right? Nobody wants to see a picture of a freaking beat up slave or a drawing of that kind of stuff. But it drove the message in that this is what is an important issue in our society. So regardless of what your opinion is on abortion in that case, the fact that they're able to show you what that image looks like, and the fact it gets you thinking, and it gets you really reevaluating your position. So if those pictures are true, if that is an accurate representation, that's either what you don't support or do support. And I guess the point is that connects it back to free speech, is that if
I didn't like what I saw, but I still supported that they could do that. You know,
in a society that has a free market of ideas, you're going to be confronted with beliefs that are abhorrent, or beliefs you don't agree with, or pictures that you don't agree with. But the point is, it gets you thinking. And if they're wrong, if they're completely wrong, then have a debate, have that conversation, tell them about it, and then move forward. So hope, like, the biggest, like, what is it called? The biggest disinfectant. Sunlight is the biggest disinfectant.
Exposure.
So like that kind of stuff, right?
Okay.
So they're exposing themselves and exposing their ideas. If they're wrong, if they're backwards, they've shown it, right? And we can have that conversation.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but the example, like, when I was talking to them, I wasn't like, I wasn't trying to pick a fight like in what happened yesterday here on campus or something like that. I was completely respectful. I'm like, let's have a discussion about this kind of stuff. And they were completely nice about how they did it. And I'm like, why can't we have these type of conversations? This is exactly what you should be able to do. Like, I didn't agree with what they were doing. I have, like, an example with my stance on, like, abortion, stuff like that. There's some things that I do agree with and some things that I don't agree with, in terms of, it's legally we're allowed to do it, but that doesn't make it morally and ethically okay. As people need to have an understanding that, like, you are as much as our government and our laws say that it's like okay and it's legal, like things
Yeah.
things before in the past have been legal, but that doesn't make them
Exactly.
okay. An example like the Jim Crow laws and
Yeah.
stuff like that, or any
Yeah.
type of discrimination towards somebody like that. So they should be allowed to do that. But
We have some viewer comments. Most of them are just some of them
take,
are
hot take, hot
compliments. I'd like to thank Siad, Laura, Zagros, and Cody for watching and contributing.
I like to thank Zagros for waking me up this
Yeah,
morning.
special thanks to Zagros.
I appreciate that.
And I'd like to address something our friend and dedicated viewer Laura said. She said, "Oh, come on, Adam, really? Mean people are hate speech? Jesus Christ, you're either for free speech or against free speech." And I think that that's something that's important to address. And, I think, I don't necessarily think
Adam's
Adam's
a
in the wrong.
fascist.
I don't think Adam's in the wrong. I think
I'm getting
we can all
roasted.
agree, or for the most part, we can all agree on the legality aspects of free speech. But I think it's still important to critique the, social and cultural aspects of it. I think Adam made a great point. People, and I've noticed a lot of people on the right are so for free speech that they are just assholes. They are abrasive for the purpose of pushing the free speech thing. And I think it's great to push boundaries and to, push the envelope to demonstrate the importance of free speech. But I think there comes a time when you are not lending your argument any credence. You are just being a bad person.
Yeah.
And would I ever want these people's speech to be legislated out of existence? No. But
an
do
issue.
I ask you as a person?
Sorry,
to-
I just want to. Yeah.
go ahead.
I just want to. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
That's
I just
okay.
didn't want to. I wanted to get my point across before I forgot. The problem, what we just talked about abortion. I just want to touch on it very, very quickly. I think, and you're more than welcome to disagree with me on this, but I think we're very. I guess I can't think of another word than privileged to have this sort of conversation here and be like, yeah, these posters sort of made me reevaluate my idea on abortion, or other posters or other crude images made me reevaluate my idea on things. I don't necessarily, disvalue that or disagree with that. The problem is that there are a lot of women and a lot of people on this campus that when they see these posters, they get uncomfortable, and they feel unsafe, and they have to go to centers that Ryerson has opened.
It's good that they're feeling uncomfortable though.
I don't know how.
They're not physically unsafe. No one is like threatening violence.
No,
against
but they would
that-
feel
that
like they're
doesn't-
physically
that doesn't really
unsafe.
matter
They
if
look
they're
at a picture
that doesn't really matter if they're
disturbs them, right?
physically unsafe. It matters that they don't feel like I cannot walk down
Yep.
Gould Street with a person that is very troubled by these images, and we cannot feel the same level of safety. That's a very big issue for me, and I think that I'm very privileged to sit here and be like, yeah, I feel I can really evaluate my thoughts on abortion with these people, but they feel unsafe,
Yeah, but
and they don't feel like they can come to campus.
any sort of the best way to deal with any sort of problem you have with graphic images or that kind of stuff is to actually explore it. Like, if you're working in psychotherapy, for example, a person who's afraid to go on an elevator, the best way to deal with that problem is to tell that person, hey, why don't you get out of your house and why don't you look at the elevator if you're afraid of the elevators that much? Why don't you press the button of the elevator door? Okay, why don't you walk into the elevator and then walk out?
like baby
right?
steps.
So yes, you take baby steps, right? If that person is just so uncomfortable with the idea of abortion, maybe they've had an abortion or they're a victim.
Yeah.
Maybe they've experienced trauma. The best way to deal with that is to experience it. Now maybe the person who is showing the picture is doing it is doing a great injustice because they're showing it to a person who they're taking baby steps, and maybe that's not the right way to go, right? I guess that's the argument that you're saying.
Sort of a big out of the frying pan into the fire sort of situation.
Yeah, and that's a serious problem. But that's not a justification to silence that person from saying or showing what they want to show. Because if you're in a free society, we shouldn't tiptoe over the feelings of others.
Mhm. And now we have a viewer comment, a question from Siad Humza, and I'm a bit to really shill for Siad here because Siad's great. He's a practicing Muslim, and he, I think, is a wonderful example of Islam being compatible with the West. He's a great modern Muslim. Thank you for your comment, Siad. He says, what is the line you define between criticism of Islam and an irrational hate towards the religion and its adherents? I'd like to start And I think that if you say that you hate the ideology of Islam, I don't think that that's a hateful thing to say. And when we're talking hateful, I mean hateful in a morally reprehensible way. I think that it's reasonable to hate a lot of the tenets that come with it. I think when you start to say you hate Muslims, when you start to devalue, dehumanize Muslims, I think that's a totally separate thing. I think that there's a difference between Islam, the religion, Islam, the ideology, and Muslims, the people. Muslims, the ethnic group, and Muslims, the followers of Islam. And so I think to criticize Islam, to criticize the ideologies that come with it, the Prophet Muhammad and the views he espoused and the things he did as documented in the Quran and the Hadith, I think that that's totally valid, and I think that that's important. But when you start to say that you don't like Muslims or that you think Muslims are bad people, that's, for me, a problem. And, of course, you should be allowed to do it, but it's not something I agree with. I think it's something that I would encourage people not to do.
So Priyank, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No.
You've been rather quiet. Do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, actually, talking about, sort of, criticism of Islam and, so ideas do not have the same protections that people do. So that's one thing to sort of hate on people and to be violent towards people. But ideas it's like a free for all. Everyone should be able to ask critical about everything as possible. And speaking about the matter, there was actually this interesting event this past weekend where they had a Muslims against M103. And there was actually there was like 300, 400 people. It was quite it was packed to capacity. Most of the crowd seemed to be Muslim themselves, and there's an understanding that, the term Islamophobia, that term came about because it came through the Muslim Brotherhood, and then it was adopted by the Human Rights Commissioner in the UK, who then regretted doing that. But that originally meant, besides criticism, being hateful of Muslims, what it also meant, it included was being critical of Islam. And there are a lot of Muslims who realize that, hey, within our community, we have different levels of, conservative Muslims. There's that sort of slew of super radical, and then there's largely moderate and very liberal and reformer Muslims. And they understand that free speech is in their favor. It is something that's required to sort of do what has happened in the Christian world and and in Judaism, where we can be critical about religion and help progress it. And so it's very important that it be there especially for religions.
And Adam, you wanted to say something in regards to that as well?
I feel like if I don't get cut off, I'm going to talk for the next 28 minutes. But
okay, thanks for talking.
No, I'll be brief, and I say that and I lie every time. The problem with that is that I think there's so many dimensions to this whole anti-Islam movement. I would say it's a lot of deep-rooted anti-Arabism. When I confront people when I confront a lot of anti-Islam people about Islam, and I mention that there are Bosnian Muslims, Albanian Muslims, and many American white Muslim converts, they sort of look at me and they're like, "What?" And I think that it's more a race issue rather than a religion issue. I think that a lot of people don't really know a lot about Islam, and they know the three hot topics of Islam is Muslims hate gays, Muslims want to take over the world, and then Muslims did 9/11. That's the three number one things that you hear from people that are very anti-Islam. And I think that if you're gonna character slander, as this term has become very popular, few bad apples versus a whole religion, then you have a problem. That's the distinction that I think is very prevalent. If you are educated and you have issues with some of what is mentioned in the Quran, then I think that that's not necessarily being anti-Islam. That's being critical. You won't meet a Muslim and hate them immediately, or you won't meet a practicing Muslim and hate them immediately. But if you say things like Islam is donkey shit, and I've heard that from people, I disagree with it absolutely completely. But I've heard that from people, they just yell that in the street, and a lot of people, especially now in Europe, they've said things very similar. And I think you know that like you're not an educated person. You can't say stuff like that. One, because it's immoral, and two, because you have nothing to back it up. So I think that's the distinction.
The thing is, for me, I would say no idea is above scrutiny. No people are beneath dignity. And so what I mean by that is, I think Majid said it very eloquently when he said it on Big Think. But I think what I mean by that
was
is,
a great Big Think.
you would say it's a philosophy channel on YouTube. What I mean by that is, you would you insult people's ideas, you criticize people's ideas, you criticize their thought process, you don't criticize who they are as a person and as a being. And so that's why I make the distinction. So when people say Islam is dog shit or anything like that, well, that doesn't mean they're saying Muslims are dog shit or the Muslims are bad people, or that doesn't mean they're being racist.
But a lot of the times they do.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate because they're blurring the distinction between ideology and person. Whereas you could be a person and you could be a person of any race and you could be a person of any creed and still have perverse ideas, right? I mean, like I don't want to get into the debate of Islam, right? Because there's a lot of aspects and a lot of criticism of Islam, but the problem I find with people who are liberal is that they group together people who are critical of Islam with people who are legitimately bigoted of Islam. And the problem with that is it kind of creates people who are it kind of creates an atmosphere where people are afraid to actually criticize Islam and provide legitimate criticism, but also it creates an atmosphere where people are, it's like the people who criticize Islam, you almost have to be a certain kind of person to criticize Islam at that point. You almost have to be a bigot because you almost have to take that road, right? Because like you get the crazies who legitimately hate Muslims and Islam. If you're going to silence the people who are critical of Islam, you know, once you silence Sam Harris, people like Sam Harris, who's left? The people who are willing to take that extra step and be actually racist and be, you know, legitimately bigoted. So for me personally, I have so many criticisms of Islam because I don't like Islam as a religion, never liked it. But the problem is, well, people say, oh, you're just bigoted against Muslims. No, I make the distinction between ideology and the person and the being.
But see, like, an example, what you just said right now, some people are going to take that
Yeah,
as
out of
if you're being
context.
Islamophobic or something, or as if you're bigoted towards Muslims.
On the term-
which is not necessarily what you were saying.
It's bullshit because you wouldn't make that sort of distinction if we're talking about Catholicism or Christianity.
But-
When I insult Christians in Catholicism,
Yeah.
and I do, it's like people.
Which you should, right?
It's like people,
Insults all around.
people they don't make that distinction. It's ridiculous because they've accepted the meme that being critical of Islam is also being critical of Arabs as a people. When the reality is that's just not the case.
Absolutely.
It's the same
And
thing
we
like-
have a question from Humphrey, and this is a great question actually. Humphrey says, "Does that mean that you don't believe in the term Islamophobia?" I believe that was directed at me. And that's something that I think is very important to bring up. I think we need to stop clinicalizing these ideologies. I think, you know, when something's a phobia, it's an irrational fear. It's actually a clinical condition. To say Islamophobia or homophobia or transphobia, I think you need to stop. People need to stop acting like anything that is a criticism of such things is an irrational fear, is a phobia. It's not a phobia. You know, there's I believe it's a Morgan Freeman quote saying, you know, homophobia is not a phobia, it's just being an asshole. And I think that there is, you know, he has a point in a way, but he also ignores the fact that you can criticize, for example, gay culture. You can criticize Islam. You can criticize the transgender movement, so to speak. And you do not have a fear. You do not have an irrational fear if you have an issue with something. To clinicalize all of this is so dangerous.
They use the word phobia, which is a medical and clinical term,
Yeah.
and they diagnose this to people who are legitimately critical of Islam, right?
Yeah.
And
For example,
legitimately bigoted, and people who are critical of Islam, right?
An example: somebody who has like a fear of like arachnophobia or something like that. Some people who like see a spider, they will literally start like screaming.
Yeah.
They'll be like
And
running
maybe
out
it
of the
is.
forest,
Maybe
stuff
it
like
truly is irrational to like
Some
to
people, maybe.
hate gay. That's completely irrational to just hate gay people,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But there's a difference between hating a person and hating the idea, and so at least Muslamophobia makes a little bit more sense because at that point you're actually talking about a person, whereas Islamophobia you're
Yeah.
being critical of a set of beliefs and ideas, right?
The problem,
and it's
yeah.
rational to be critical of that, and it's rational to disagree
But
with Islam.
the problem with that is that there are a lot of people that are just general Islamophobics. Like I remember when
I just call those people bigots. I don't call
Yeah.
them Islamophobics. I just those are if they're critical of Islam, then yeah, okay, you're critical of Islam. But if they just hate brown people, then they're
No,
just
but
bigoted.
you're
in
saying
general.
that we shouldn't use the term Islamophobia because the
it makes
the
no
term
sense is
itself
what
is
I'm
an
saying.
irrational fear. But
I'm saying it's not irrational to disagree with the tenets of Islam.
No, but there
it's
are-
not even irrational to hate it. To be honest with you, that's what I think.
I don't. If you've done your research and you have a certain amount of beliefs that you can hate the religion, then I think go for it. And
Oh, yeah,
I can't harm that
yeah.
right. But a lot of people, like I remember when Murshid Ali came out and talked about his conversion to Islam, there were a lot of people on Twitter that were like, "I'm going to stop watching his movies. He's Muslim. It's over."
Yeah,
Like,
and that's silly. That's
yeah.
really silly.
And that's an Islamophobe for me. Yeah.
Well, I mean, like then we go into the distinction. Oh, it's radical Islam that we don't like versus.
yeah, but a lot of people
So I
don't know
do-
that distinction.
Yeah.
I do want
People
to.
just group him,
Yeah.
paint like a huge
A
brush
few
towards
bad
all
apples.
people.
I'll say that again and again.
Yeah.
I do want to shift the conversation over a bit because we could talk about the idea of Islamophobia, Muslims for an entire show.
Radicalization.
I want to shift the conversation to freedom of speech on college and university campuses because that's a big thing. So my question: how free is freedom of speech on college and university
I think we should let
campuses
Priyank,
these days?
for
Yeah,
sure.
let's start with Priyank.
He's
You go
the
to York
expert here.
University. How bad is it there, or how good is it there? We don't know. I think I gave it away,
pretty
but
bad.
how is it?
So yeah,
How
so York
bad?
I'd say is pretty bad. Not as bad maybe as Ryerson, but like I think Ryerson and York is like among the worst in the countries.
Probably.
It's just that because I mean most universities are super ideologically to the left, and I don't know I don't know if I still am on the left at this point, but I still like to think of myself
It's
as a
hard,
liberal.
isn't it? To
Yeah,
to
exactly.
maintain with those values.
Just take the good values from liberalism
Yeah.
and then just adopt that to conservatism. I mean, that's what I've done.
Yeah, I think that's what a lot of people are doing nowadays.
Like a
I
golden
don't
mean
hate
thing.
gays, and I
Because
I agree
like
with
like
free
free speech was a liberal value, and it's something that was fought for by the left in universities in the 70s. At Berkeley we had the famous free speech fight, and now it seems the new free speech fight is coming from the right, and the new authoritarians are people on the left, and unfortunately that's the case we've seen across universities. Like with the pro life people trying to talk about their stuff, they're getting I don't know like what the situation that happened yesterday. I don't know why security didn't come in and protect their right to speak. Similarly, we've had incidences with like pro-life groups being shouted at York. We had a newspaper banned from campus, and I think the federal government actually, some MP had a part to do in that as well. There's a general climate of you can't speak certain stuff. I luckily have the brown privilege where I can say stuff and not get like this knee-jerk reaction of being racist. And unfortunately, a lot of people, like I study political science, people just don't feel like they can express themselves in tutorial or during lectures, and then we'll meet during smoke breaks or after class, and it's like, hey, I actually think this, blah blah blah, and that whole atmosphere is just not conducive to what university is supposed to be.
Well, here's the thing: they first come after people who are hateful, right? People that everyone morally disagrees with. So they stamp out Nazis and whatever. So great, that's okay. They did that, right? And then they went after people they ideologically disagree with, like people who are pro-life, and then people who are part of the men's rights groups, right? And then they just keep creeping and creeping and creeping and keep taking away these groups, which is, we're now talking about this now because they're starting to attack groups that people agree with. Like, because I'm pro-life and I agree with a lot of the tenets of their group, right? But as they keep doing this and as they keep censoring people, we're gonna wake up to a world where even having the most mundane liberal opinion is going to be censored. Like, if you have any sort of opinion like people, like right now they're going after people who believe in free speech. They're going after free speech groups. Why? Because that's an affront to them censoring the groups that they want to censor. And so they're going to soon censor certain nationality groups. They're going to censor the
Like if one
Israeli,
falls, then the
pro-Israeli
other one's
groups,
gonna-
that kind of stuff. They're going to censor probably Jewish groups later. But, like, they just keep coming and coming and coming and coming and keep trying to create their own little world within universities and try to dissent. When the reality is people are different and we all disagree with each other. We should all live in a world where we have a free marketplace.
And I think that really rings true that everything's being censored because, honestly, I thought that this show would be censored, at least after the first season, because it's very, not to, like, gloat or make ourselves look great, but this show is very different from any other show that's on Spirit Live. We actually talk about, there are amazing
Important
shows
issues.
on Spirit Live. There's no questioning that. But this show really talks about the important issues affecting our lives that people are too scared to talk about. And I felt that because Ryerson is very liberal in, or at least very one-sided in political views, I thought that this show would get censored. So I'm very glad that we're able to have this discussion here.
I ran with a progressive slate for the RSU, and I don't regret.
I'll put it in there.
I don't regret that decision. The people that I ran with are very good people, and I'm very happy that they are the reason why I am now in the Ryerson Students Union, and I will not take that credit away from them. But I was given a lot of slack for some of the things that were said on the show by other people.
Not slack. You weren't given slack. You were given flack.
I was given flack.
Slack would be a good thing if they give you slack.
Yeah, I was given flack by some people that things that I've said on the show and things that other people said on the show that I was associated with.
Like something that Marsha or I or Elliot said.
or anybody. I think that it's very biased of me to take a dump on these pro-life people when and then say society is too politically correct when I hear people getting mad at like Rami Malek when he played King Tut in The Night at the Museum, and everybody's like, how can they get a white guy to play King Tut? And it's like, he's not white, he's Egyptian.
Yeah.
What's so funny, I have a really quick thing to add to that. So
Is that
people
old
got so
movie from,
mad.
like, the 50s?
No,
Night
Night at the Museum with Ben Stiller.
Yeah.
So when they got mad about
okay.
Rami Malek playing King Tut, which is actually historically accurate to how King Tut looked, so the major historians have agreed on. When they released Tut, or I believe it was just called Tut, it was a TV show, a miniseries. They got Avan Jogia, who's an actor.
I know who that is.
Yeah, he's from Victorious.
He's Victorious, yeah, the only
They got
Canadian on the show.
Avan Jogia to play
yeah.
King Tut. He's an Indian guy because it was such an issue. They needed King Tut to be a guy who had dark skin, so they got an Indian guy to play King Tut.
Yeah.
People are going to criticize everything no matter what.
Or like
They got the
wrong
Prim in Hunger Games, that Prim was black. Everybody got so mad
the
that
book
Prim was
explicitly
black.
describes that she has black skin.
Exactly.
Her skin was like, I forget exactly what the
It was
the
a
book said.
hazelnut brown.
Yeah.
That's
Oh,
what
yeah,
it said?
I remember
they
that.
said.
Yeah.
I was going to
Does
say
it-
black
does
with
it-
sunflower seeds.
Doesn't
but
it just
never
piss
mind.
you off that we're living in a world where this is the issues that we talk about?
Yeah, we're talking about the Hunger Games right
Like,
now.
this
but
is
when
the,
in
this is the
relation to
pressing
free
issue right
speech.
now. Is
Like
what skin color
I was
is.
reading a lot of criticisms of Trudeau, and given that I think he deserves a lot of criticism, but this particular one when he gave Malala Yousafzai honorary Canadian citizenship, and everybody's like, how can you give Malala Yousafzai honorary citizenship when you support the bombing in Syria? Like correlation, like the two don't.
Nobody understands what it is. People don't understand that there's a civil war in Syria. People just think it's like Syria is one like unified thing.
People don't understand that there's Assad and the rebels
saying
and the Kurds
how
and
how
ISIS.
can you bomb Syria for bombing Syria to tell them not to bomb Syria anymore? Like no, it's not Syria bombing Syria.
It's not black and white essentially.
And people
Definitely.
don't understand it. And these politically illiterate people, they can have opinions if they want, but the fact that their opinions are given so much credence is ridiculous.
Yeah.
And on the topic at hand, one thing I've noticed is that universities, of course, are often on their own plane of existence in terms of ideology and zeitgeists and how the general population feels. There's a big backlash against free speech, I find, against the term free speech. It's become a curse word, I find. And one thing that I find really interesting is the backlash against centrists. I've heard centrists get more stick for being centrists than I've gotten for being a conservative. And so many people on the left just hate centrists for not being left enough. And I find it's absolutely terrible that people are not allowed to be moderate. How can you not be allowed to be moderate? How silly is that?
It's like you either have to be like a radical, like regressive
Leftist.
SJW left. or
well,
you
that's
have
what you have to be. 'Cause
Either don't tread on me or like the left version.
Yeah,
of
people's
that.
like either you don't agree with my opinions and you're an all right white supremacist, Nazi, whatever BS terms they want to use
Yeah.
just to hate on somebody, or you're regressive.
or you're
Yeah.
a centrist and you're a Nazi
Yeah.
sympathizer.
The thing is,
Yeah.
if you're an activist in one of these political organizations, you almost feel like you have to be more of a radical, or at least you have to present yourself more of a radical.
Yeah.
Than your believers are than you actually are, and that's probably why they're trying to pull people who are moderate and centrist
Right.
into either you're with us or against us. It's because if they want to see any sort of political activism going on their side, they have to be more radical,
Yeah.
which is a damn shame.
Also, just a 10-second thing for the people that, think that Trudeau can't be supportive of women's rights in the Middle East and women's education in the Middle East and anything to do with progress in the Middle East. Has the term geopolitics slipped anybody's mind? Canada essentially needs to support the States in terms of their actions, or else we get screwed.
Yeah.
So
I completely agree
I'd
with
like
you.
people to remember the very wonderful topic of
with
geopolitics.
And we do. Do you have something?
Yeah,
quick?
so I often hear people on the right, and I think it's very important to criticize my own side, criticizing Trudeau for selling arms to Saudi Arabia whilst claiming to be a feminist. I don't necessarily see anything wrong with that. If we aren't selling arms to Saudi Arabia, somebody else is.
So we are running low on time. We have about 5 minutes before I close the show. My last question, very quickly. What can one do to be able to express their opinions without being labeled a quote-unquote hater?
Just don't be a dick about it. Honestly, if you have an opinion that's generally criticized, whether it be from the left or from the right, I think there's a certain level of professionalism that needs to be maintained. Whether or not that level of professional, I can't really put it on a scale of 1 to 10 of how professional you need to be, but don't walk around with pictures of dead fetuses and walk up to pro-choice supporters and be like, I hope you all get raped and your mothers should have aborted you all. I think that's an issue, but if you are a pro-life person, I believe that you have the right to present your topic, and I think you should do so respectfully. Coming onto campus and making a lot of people feel unsafe and uncomfortable, you're not getting your point across, you're just making it harder for yourself. And that goes for people on the left too. I think that the whole Tommy Lahren is dead party on Twitter and the Punch a Nazi party and all that, I think that that's equally, if not just as bad. Lastly, I want to quote what your professor said on the show about anti-Semitism.
Yeah.
If you are faced with someone that is an anti-Semite or that you disagree with, just shower them with kindness. And as Care Bear and as snowflake as that sounds, I honestly believe that, and I think that's
I'm
the last thing
actually
I'm
inclined
say.
to agree. For me, and I hate to sound pessimistic, I pride myself on being an optimist. I truly believe that there's no winning a lot of the time. On a university campus specifically, I just think you need to have your points backed up with facts. You need to research and make your arguments irrefutable. If your arguments are not irrefutable, you need to go and find a different stance. And I think that that's the most you could do to mitigate it.
I would say definitely do your research, and you have the right to get offended 100%, but don't just get offended and then become thinking irrational, like when you're going to have a conversation of any type of political discourse. An example, I had that I was being not necessarily attacked, but I was talking with 4 other girls about pro-abortion and pro-choice and stuff like that. And instead of me just being like, oh, I can't believe you guys think this or something like that, I backed up all my arguments in whatever way I deemed possible. So an example, I did that philosophically, politically, and just backing it up with anything that I've read in any literature. And that's it. I just do your research and, just hopefully don't end in violence.
Read a book.
Yeah.
Read a book.
Yeah, so
Your usual.
I think being nice always helps, but still the case is that just certain topics on university campuses are just off topic, and if you go there, you're still going to get, you're going to get that pushback that attempts to censor, no matter how nice you are. I think if you're a student, you just got to keep going at it. Form clubs if it's something that you're very passionate about, and we need more free speech clubs, and it looks like it's going that way. And besides that, another big issue is just student unions have just had a stranglehold for quite a long time, especially at York and lots of schools in GTA. It's important to make that an issue during elections. And besides that, I'm actually kind of optimistic because if you look at the sort of new generation that will be coming in to universities, the Generation Z, who are like now high school students.
They're more conservative these days.
They're more conservative, but
It's right,
more
guys.
than that, they're very politically incorrect. Right? That's their form of rebellion.
Yeah.
They didn't eat up all the
Because
things that the
racism
media
is
is
a
telling them.
boogeyman to these people.
Yeah, because
they've never actually experienced it and never seen it because it's not
because
real.
we live in the least
Yeah.
racist part of the world in the least racist time ever.
It's funny to just poke fun at that.
Yes, and so these people will be coming in. They're the generation that made Milo as huge as he is, and so I'm actually optimistic. And this fight's happening, so get involved in it. And I think it's eventually going to turn in our favor, and just have fun along the way.
Well, my policy is just speak truth to power and just say what you want to say and never hold back what you're feeling, what your opinions are. Now, of course, you need to situate yourself in a manner where you say something to the best of your ability, the best way you possibly can. And that's just a personal thing. You need to build that up as you go throughout your life. You need to build up virtue. You need to build up character. But never feel afraid to silence. Never feel afraid to speak power to truth and to say what you want to say. Because the moment you begin to silence yourself, the moment you begin to doubt whether or not you should say what you want to say, let's put it that way. The moment you say that is the moment you silence, is the moment you begin to tear away at your soul, who you fundamentally are. Because everything that I say and everything that I do is an expression of who I am as a person. And yeah, I might do bad things, I might do wrong things, and yeah, I might not be incorrect. But at the end of the day, I put myself out there and I try to be the best person I can possibly be. And I learn through experience. I'm challenged, and in a free market, people disagree with me, and we argue and we debate with each other. And I try to put myself the best way I can. But at the end of the day, I never try to silence myself, because there's already a lot of people who want to silence me, right? Just for disagreeing with them. The moment I silence myself is the moment I silence who I am fundamentally as a being.
I like that.
Great.
We have one
Great
more
one.
comment
And,
that
yeah,
I just want
one
to draw
very
attention
quick
to.
comment, yep.
It's from Laura Chen again. She says, Adam, the problem is that certain rational evidence-based arguments are considered hateful and violent. I totally disagree with you, but thank you for keeping mature and articulate. Smiley face.
I have to practice what I preach in terms of being mature and articulate.
No, it's
so-
awesome. Even if we disagree with each other, at the end of the day, we
I'm
get together
happy
and
that
talk about
like,
issues.
see,
Yeah, we shouldn't
I've
be
actually,
screaming at each other's neck or
I've
something
even
like
gotten
that.
heat for the comment section of this show. So
I've gotten heat from people who are from the right and the left, people who are legitimately bad and people who are just decent.
Yeah.
Got heat from everyone.
Great.
It's fine.
Thank you to everybody.
Yeah,
for
it
commenting.
was,
Thanks so
it
much.
was
It
a
was
great
a
show.
fantastic show.
It was a
Never-
great show.
yeah.
I do have to close the show now. It's going to be difficult. It's the last one. So that was our last show of the year. After 25 great episodes totaling over 9,000 views on Facebook, the Raben Report tackled some great topics and hopefully triggered discussion. I want to thank today's guests firstly for coming on. Thank you, Jay. Thank you,
Thank you,
Priyank.
guys.
You
Thank
really
you.
made
Appreciate
this
that.
show really great for its last
I
episode.
hope I was as articulate as I possibly can.
Oh,
No,
you
no,
were
you
very
were.
articulate. Yeah.
Definitely.
These are tough issues to tackle.
Yeah.
So it's hopefully.
And we're glad
do it
that
the
you
right
could
way.
be on the show to
Thank you very
tackle
much.
them with us.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
So now I want to thank everyone that tuned in and that messaged us live over the past 2 seasons. But I also want to thank Marshall, Adam, and Daniel for signing on to this show when it was only an idea. You guys really do an incredible job of not only educating our audiences on certain issues, but me personally as well. I learn a lot from you guys on these issues, and you're all incredibly smart, well-spoken, and I'm very privileged to have you on this show. So
Not
thank
white
you
privilege,
guys. Yeah, I don't know about white privilege, but
Thank
probably.
you, Elliot, for
Thank
being such a
you.
great
Yeah,
host,
man.
and thank
Yeah.
you for bringing us all together. It's been a fantastic experience.
Yeah,
and,
I'm
Great
really,
ride.
I'm really happy I met
Yeah.
these guys, and I'm glad it was.
It's always great to be able to have to talk and express your
I
opinions.
learned a
like
lot.
that.
It's really helped me with
Yeah.
my articulation, my confidence, and
It's made
everything.
me a
For
better.
sure,
It made me
exactly.
definitely made me a better person.
Yeah.
Definitely made me a less hateful person.
Yeah.
Um,
And yeah,
Yeah.
I'm so glad that we could do this. Now, lastly, before we go, do you guys want to mention, like, very quickly your favorite episodes over the past 8 months? Just the episode itself.
Live election coverage.
Live election
Yeah,
coverage.
For sure.
for me-
Watching me get triggered, seeing Donald Trump winning all of those states is pretty hilarious.
no, for me,
In
it's just that
retrospect,
one
looking
point
back
that
at
we
it.
all see Florida getting called, and we're all
Yeah.
like, "Ah!" And we have this moment of like realization. But I think my favorite episode was definitely our sexual assault episode. Just for that one moment, we were like, "Oh yeah, I want to respect women so hard." Like I've just been replaying that and thinking about that in my head.
It's like, oh, if she consented, or the things I
or
would
the
do
things
to
I
her.
would do to her if I had consent. I just think that was one of my favorite moments on the show, and yeah, that's definitely a good one.
All right.
Yeah. If you guys watched the show before, any episodes? No.
Yeah, I like the last one, the the one on sexual assault. That was very informative.
This is the
thank
only
you.
episode I've ever watched.
That's okay. Then it's your favorite. It's good.
It's my favorite. Yeah,
And if it's not your favorite, I'm a little concerned. We're doing something wrong. So the Raben Report will hopefully be back next September with brand new shows at hopefully the same time and definitely the same people. Signing off for the Raben Report, I'm Elliot Raben.